Our next module in this personal productivity course is managing change. By the end of this course, we expect that you'll be able to describe the nature of change, explain the role of managers in planning and implementing change, explain how to plan for a change project, explain how to run a persuasion campaign to implement a change project successfully, explain how to run a persuasion campaign to implement a change project successfully, practice skills and techniques that are essential in the implementation of the process. The course content. Session 1 will be discussing change and the role of managers. Session 2, planning for change. Session 3, implementing change successfully. Session 1, change and the roles of managers. Attributes of change. There is only one constant in this universe, and that constant is change. Change is inevitable, change is complex, and change is often opposed by people. What is change management? Change management is how to initiate change continuously and incorporate that change into a managed corporate environment. Many people mistakenly associate change management with dealing with resistance because resistance management is the biggest challenge in change management. However, such a definition is incomplete. Change management is a process which involves both initiating the change and incorporating it through building a new culture and infrastructure for the change to be sustainable. Change management is not about how to deal with resistance to change. The role of managers in managing change. Leadership and management are often used interchangeably, and there's certainly an overlap. A person can play both roles at the same time. However, it is often useful to differentiate between both roles, even though both are important and a successful change needs both. What does a leader do? A leader inspires staff with visions that encourages them to accept change. A leader motivates them by creating a working environment where everybody wants to give their best. A leader provides staff with a clear direction so that they know where they are heading, which also helps to focus their attention and efforts. A leader communicates to the staff why change is needed, its benefits, how it will affect them, and keeps them informed about the project's progress, its achievements as it unfolds. What does a manager do? A manager plans all activities required for the change project, organizes and coordinates all aspects of the project to ensure the whole process moves towards the desired outcome, monitors and controls to ensure the project implementation process is on the right track, suggests how to improve things based on his or her monitorings and evaluations. Session 2, planning for change. There are 6 steps when planning for change. The first step is to define the change direction. The second stage is to analyze for change. The third step is to identify change objectives. The fourth step is to plan tasks. The fifth step is to assess readiness. And the final step is implementation. Step 1, defining the direction of change. Why do we need to define the change? Before embarking on change, people and organizations need to know where they are directed. This is done through having a vision for their change project. A vision here is a picture of the future, different from the current one. It serves as a direction that shows employees the destination that they must reach. For example, a company's vision may be to find solutions that help it reach global standards. It is an effective tool used by world leaders to inspire about change and excite supporters to follow them. Business leaders tend not to set a vision for their change projects. As a result, employees do not feel convinced about the change and hence do not fully support it. So how would a leader formulate a vision for change? A leader needs to take into account the following factors. 1. External factors. External factors could be change in the business environment, which will force change either in a reactive way or create opportunities for taking the initiative and actively leading the change. For example, the continuing change in the progress of technology and the changes in skills, tasks, structures, and culture of these companies. Other factors to take into account are the internal factors. Internal factors include changes currently happening in the company culture and the resources needed. The third factor to consider are the people and stakeholders. You need to find out what excites them, what do they aspire to, what are their skills, and what are their goals. Even the leaders, what are their values, what are their priorities, and what also inspires them. The outcome of all of this is the vision for change. For the vision of change to be useful, it must have the following characteristics. 1. It must be grounded on business knowledge. A vision should be developed over time and based on extensive knowledge of the industry, organization, and technology important to the success of the business. 2. It must be concrete and specific. It must describe the future in concrete, specific images along with the desired result. 3. It must have a clear destination. It should paint a picture of a specific end, state, or condition to be achieved. 4. It must present a clear contrast between current and preferred conditions. It needs to articulate why things need to change and the ways in which the future state is preferable to the current situation. 5. It must be focused on the medium or long term. A vision describes a future state, not next week or next quarter. 6. It must stretch people. A vision should inspire people to stretch their abilities to reach a higher level of achievement. 7. It must tie in with the needs and the desires of others. A vision inspires people by inviting them to work towards things that are important to them and to the larger society around them. 8. It must provide a sense of significance. It helps people understand the importance their contribution and the contribution of the organization make in a greater sense. Step 2. Analyzing for change. The company's capacity for change is the first thing that we need to analyze in order to answer two important questions. What do we have to change? And how much can we change? And how much do we need to change? The areas to be analyzed include the following: staff skills and capabilities. The result of analyzing the skills and capabilities of technical and non-technical staff will reveal whether they have the abilities to move to a new model. Business systems, structure, and procedures. What is the company's current business structure? Is it complicated and rigid, or is it flexible and easy to change? Do the existing structures and procedures support the company's workflow? Do managers and supervisors have enough autonomy to make the necessary decisions? Are they familiar with doing so? Work procedures. Are they adequate to cover all the steps in the business process workflow? For example, a warehouse needs a clear set of procedures for managing stock and controlling cost. Are the procedures clear enough for all the staff to follow? Availability of resources. What is the available amount for the change? Where can we get the money to finance the change project? The outcome of this analysis will tell us the capacity for change and the amount of change that we need. Identifying change objectives. A vision is the big picture that provides direction for a project in the medium to the long term, whereas objectives are specific targets for the short term. Why do we need the objectives of change? To make it clear to staff the targets they should achieve. These targets also serve as milestones for periodic performance measurements. Reasonably high targets can motivate people to be more innovative and focused to achieve objectives. Clear and reasonably high targets also help to prevent complacency. There are 5 criteria for good objectives. 1, it must be specific. It must be shown in specific numbers. It must be measurable. We must be able to measure it quantifiably. It must be achievable. Objectives must be based on a thorough analysis of the situation to ensure that it is attainable given the existing resources. Good objectives must also be relevant. In other words, they must be significant to the organization. It must also be time-bound. It must state precisely when something is to be achieved. Planning task. In planning task, you must determine the scope of the change project. You must establish a time scale and budget. Identify the project sponsors. Identify who the change agents will be. Schedule the task. Build an infrastructure to support the change. And establish a communication plan. Readiness assessment. Why do we need to assess readiness? This is to ensure that all key players are well prepared for the change, and also to know the riskiest factors to focus on before embarking on the change. What do we need to assess? We need to assess awareness, acceptance, ownership, and commitment. On the screen, you have an activity. The steps for planning for change has been mixed up. Please put them back in the correct. Session 3. Implementing change successfully. There are 4 phases of a persuasion campaign. As proved by the high rates of failure for change projects in the past, the biggest challenge in making a change is to convince and persuade people about the need for the change. In order to ensure the change will happen, the leader needs to employ an effective persuasion campaign. There are 4 phases. The first phase is announcing the change. The second phase is creating the frame. The third phase is managing the mood. And the fourth phase is reinforcing good habits. Phase 1, announcing the change. What is the goal in announcing the change? The goal is to ensure that staff seriously listen to tough messages, question old assumptions, and consider new ways of working. Common challenges that occur when a change plan is introduced include cynicism, skepticism, and resistance. It is even harder for managers if the organization or department has had a succession of leaders or seen several failures of change plans in the past. It is critical that the change leader must be able to ensure that the staff will actually listen to the tough message, think and question their old assumptions, and be willing to consider new ways of thinking and working. How do we announce a change effectively? The first thing to do is to break old habits. This is very difficult, as old ways of thinking are embedded in people's beliefs and behaviors. First, we need to reinterpret old habits negatively. The leader can explain what people can lose if they continue following their old ways. Secondly, we need to invoke a major threat from the outside that calls for insiders' unification to defeat the threat. For example, fierce competition from large manufacturers in Asia countries after Nigeria relaxed import policy and sought investment from this country will require Nigerian companies to change in order to survive. Third, we need to emphasize the unattractiveness of past habits or the lack of compatibility of those attributes with the current goals and requirements for success. The second way we can break old habits is to introduce the change through a vision. Use the vision to excite and inspire people about the change. We can also introduce the change using a moral purpose. For example, suppose the new manufacturing process will produce almost no toxic gas and waste. Therefore, it will significantly improve the water and air. Phase 2. Creating the frame. What is the purpose of creating the frame? It is to ensure that staff understand and interpret the proposal for change in a consistent way in order to gain acceptance and favorable outcomes. What does the frame consist of? It consists of the company-wide presentation or team meetings to inform staff about the change, the context of the change, and the plan for change. It consists of communication through public media. This channel is normally used for large or serious change projects. For example, the company managing director may grant a newspaper interview to speak about a restructuring program. Internal communication is also important, such as emails, intranet, and internal monthly or weekly news bulletins. Change agents. This is one of the most effective channels to frame the change plan. However, in order to achieve the best results, the sponsor and change leaders should work closely and consistently with the change agents to ensure they are able to provide sufficient, consistent, and timely information to staff. Change agents must understand that they cannot lie to staff. In a situation where they do not know an answer, they must know where to ask for the answer. They can also use suggestion boxes. Phase 3. Managing the mood. What is the goal of managing the mood? Change, regardless of how small, involving downsizing, is often depressing. People feel uncomfortable, insecure, and stressed as their co-workers and friends leave. In such a situation, managing employee moods becomes very critical for the leaders to preserve a receptive environment for change. At this stage, the leaders need to pay close attention to the employees' emotions. Leaders should be aware of the ebb and flow of their feelings and moods in order to take appropriate actions to reduce stress and encourage people to adapt to the change. What should be done? We need to acknowledge staff's feelings and efforts. It is the leader's task to make staff feel that their sacrifices are not in vain, and that their efforts and accomplishments have been recognized and rewarded. For example, the leader should explicitly sympathize with employees' feelings. I know that this week has been very hard for you as you have to work with a new system, even while some employees have departed. You should help staff to look to the future by using encouraging messages. For example, our target is not only to be highly professional and impressive, but also to set an example as a unique customer service center. Encourage and keep employees focused on the continuing hard work by keeping them informed about the project's achievements and progress. Remind everyone about the benefits of the change, including the rewards and incentives. For example, remind staff that a pay increase will result from a successful cost control program. How to do it? Use all communication channels of the frame. Hold an away day or outdoor activities. Use of motivating incentives and rewards. Celebrate achievements. Phase 4. Reinforcing good habits. So what is the goal of reinforcing good habits? The toughest challenge for leaders during change projects is to prevent staff from backsliding into dysfunctional routines and undesirable behavior. It is easy for people to revert to their old habits as they can be triggered automatically and unconsciously by familiar circumstances and stimuli. Hence, the leader needs to help them maintain new sets of behavior by providing them with opportunities to practice them. What should be done to reinforce good habits? Use both formal and informal communication. The leader should constantly reinforce the vision for change. We discussed many formal communication channels earlier. Informal channels include the leader having lunch with workers or talking to staff during coffee breaks. Set an example through day-to-day behavior. Using day-to-day behavior as an example, the leader can communicate what behavior he or she wants staff to enact. For example, a leader with a vision to create a customer-focused department can set an example through the amount of time or effort he or she devotes to the customers and how he or she handles difficult customers. Set an example through business decisions. To promote a vision, the leader should demonstrate the vision's attributes through their business decisions. For example, if the leader intends to build and reinforce the integrity of an organization, he or she should refuse an order if he or she knows the requirements cannot be met. Use reward and punishment. The leader can praise or reward desired behaviors such as openness, tolerance, teamwork, and delegation to show staff what he or she likes and dislikes. Resistance and strategies. Why does change encounter resistance? Some of the reasons why people resist change are as follows. Lack of conviction that change is needed. Staff resist change if they are not properly informed about the purpose and needs of the change. Dislike of imposed change. This is a situation in a company where the leader imposes change on staff who do not have the opportunity to express their views. Dislike of surprise. Change tends to be resented if people are surprised about the change. Fear of the unknown. People do not like uncertainty. Reluctance to deal with unpopular issues. Fear of inadequacy and failure. Staff is skeptical of their capabilities to cope with change, or they doubt the success of the change project. Disturbed practices, habits, and relations. Change can alter or destroy long-established relationships and practices in a company. For example, older workers tend to resist change because they will lose the power gained from years of experience in the former system. Lack of respect for the people who initiate and lead the change. People are skeptical about change if they do not trust and respect the leader. This can also happen if the staff has seen many past change projects which result in failure. Strategies to minimize negative reactions. Some emotional responses you can get when you're trying to effect change in your organization is denial, anger, bargaining, depression, exploration, and acceptance. If you have staff in denial, what you need to do is avoid confrontation. You need to strengthen relationships, and you need to take the one step at a time approach. If there's some angry people, don't take things personally. You need to encourage open dialogue. Some staff will come bargaining. Try and negotiate with them, but stand your ground, and then discuss rationales. If some people are depressed, then you need to provide support and training, increase two-way communication, and then encourage responsibility. Some people would accept your change projects, recognize and reward these people, and identify their learning points. Strategies to manage resistance. There are certain strategies you can adopt to manage resistance. You can educate and communicate with your staff. This is a vital first step in the change process. Remember, the following should be addressed: vision and needs for change, and then the rationale behind the change. Participation is another strategy you can use. This is an effective way to build ownership and gain staff acceptance for the change. Get input for planning or improving the change plan. Discuss views on issues and brainstorming for ideas, and then involve people whose actions must change in the developing and implementing process. The next strategy to manage resistance is providing support. This is to make people feel secure and confident that they are able to cope with new changes. One of the ways you can provide support is to train, coach, counsel, or have open discussions. Next, you can negotiate. This is to negotiate for a win-win situation rather than a confrontation. You need to be flexible and take other views and needs into account. You need to demonstrate that concessions create concessions in return. You need to find benefits for everyone. And lastly, you need to co-opt people in. This strategy is to avoid confrontation and turn an enemy into a friend. Giving a resistor a desirable role in the change process puts him or her in a position where he or she can see the situation from a new perspective and have some ownership of the process. On your screen, you'll see a small caselet. Please read the case and answer the questions below it. We have come to the end of the Managing Change module. At the beginning of this module, our course objectives were to describe the nature of change, explain the role of managers in planning and implementing change, explain how to plan for a change project, explain how to run a persuasion campaign to implement a change project successfully, practice skills and techniques that are essential in the implementation process. I hope we've been able to deliver on this course objectives. Well done! We have come to the end of the Personal Productivity course. We want to encourage you to put into practice what you have learned in this course. Remember, successful organizations are productive organizations, and your organization cannot be productive if you don't communicate effectively with your staff. You cannot be productive if your staff are not motivated. You cannot be productive if you have not learned to manage change. I want to thank you for being part of this course. You have a quiz that you need to take. Please take your quiz, and I wish you the best of luck.